So welcome to the Monday Mindset, Miss Chandra Jarrett.
Yes. Thank you, Kevin. You and Tracy are so kind. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely.
We're so glad to have you. I'm actually going to exit. I'm going to watch the chat. So if you're with us today and you want to chat and ask Chandra a question or you have a comment, feel free, and we will do those at the end. So I'll see you at the end, okay?
Rock and roll. All right. Thank you, Tracy.
All right, Chandra, engineering in Nashville with Chick-fil-A and sweet tea.
Exactly. Yes.
I love it. I love it. All right. So Chandra, give us the 30 seconds, 60 seconds, however long you want to go. Like who is Chandra Jarrett? What are you up to? How did you get to where you are in life? Like what's your story?
Hey, you've done a great job, Kevin. So born and raised in Nashville, went into engineering. Love the auto industry because I love the complexity and simplicity of vehicles, that anything made can be really whittled down to one piece, like everything has a starting point. Was in engineering for quite some time, as you said, almost 2 decades, and realized I wasn't passionate about it. I was good at it, but I didn't love it. So I journaled for 2 years, asked God why I was created. And while there, one of the things I love was training and equipping leaders, engineers. So I moved out into the nonprofit sector specifically because of my faith.
Okay.
And wanting to merge the two together. And that's what I've done the last 20 years. I know I probably don't look as young as I am. But I love bringing faith into leadership tools, principles to really help people of faith walk out it in a practical way in the secular or the 7 mountains, depending on what language people want to use. But how do I live well with integrity? And so that's what I've been doing.
I love it. So speaking of cars, do you have a favorite car? Like, is there an all-time favorite car? Putting you on the spot.
I used to, but now I don't. So I used to love Lexus and nothing. I mean, I still think it's a great car, and Mercedes. I think those are great vehicles.
Yeah.
But now I've just started researching. It's interesting because I'm looking for a new vehicle now that I'm here in Nashville with my granddaughters.
Yeah.
What am I going to not have to pay maintenance for?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I pay a lot of money on the front end, is it going to cost me over the long haul?
That's right.
Or can I just find a car that's a great price? Or actually, I'm looking at an SUV, to be honest with you, that is going to endure the long haul, because I want to be able to pay it off. I don't want a car payment. Who wants a car payment in 2021?
Yeah.
So I don't really have a favorite. What's your favorite?
I'm dumb when it comes to cars. I never really got into them. I like cars, but I'm not a car guy. And so whenever friends would talk about certain cars, I'm like, I don't even know what that is half the time. And I used to want, in my earlier career, I wanted a really nice car. I wanted to look the part, right? I cared about having a nice looking car. Yeah. And then eventually I was like, I want a car that gets me from point A to point B.
Yeah.
One that's safe for my kids now, that matters. And, I do, with my work, if I'm not flying, I drive a decent amount of places. So I want good gas. I want reliable. I want reliable and comfortable is really what I care about at this point. Yeah. I'm car dumb, and I'm okay with that. It's probably being car dumb has probably saved me money because I don't care about having the nicest car, right?
Exactly.
I just want something that's going to run. I want efficient. So I love it. All right. So we're on the Monday mindset, and let's talk about, was there a point in time, a situation, or just kind of through experience and wisdom and maturity, you realized that mindset mattered? But when did it click that mindset was something that was actually important, something you needed to be aware of and be working on?
Honestly, Kevin, it took probably getting into my career before it clicked. And it wasn't until I became an engineer that I realized that doing things like learning about Stephen Covey or Franklin Covey, just principles that I was learning as an engineer, really began to trigger my thinking. Now, again, growing up, my faith has always informed me, but I didn't always know where to place it, if that makes sense. So I knew the word of God, I knew scriptures, but I didn't know the value it would have on my mindset. So one of my favorites is Proverbs 23:7 that says, as a man thinketh, so is he. So that was something that I kind of had anchored, But it wasn't until my career that I knew something needed to shift. I entered a very dark place as I was coming out of my engineering career,
Mhm.
going through a divorce. And I found myself beginning to spiral into
Mhm.
kind of depression and just very sad thoughts.
Mhm.
And that went on for years, and I didn't know how to get out. And it was then that I realized I've got to change how I think. Like
Yeah.
something has to shift. And that was probably the turning place for me.
Yeah. No, that's good. What did that look like? So I think there's two things, right? It's one, acknowledging that mindset matters. And then it's saying, what am I going to do about this? Because it's
Mhm,
easy to, I think once you go down that rabbit hole, it's easy to
mhm,
just keep spiraling. And so for anyone listening, like who's been in that situation, don't feel shame in that. Like that's a normal response. Doesn't mean you're weak. That's normal, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so at some point to flip that switch and to say like, you know what, the way I'm thinking isn't helping me. It's not this person's fault or that person's fault or this situation's fault. It's like I'm actually thinking a certain way and I haven't been intentional with that. And so if I want to get better, it's going to start with the way that I think. Get into that verse, like as a man thinketh, so is he. Well, I'm not thinking well, which means I'm not well. So how did you start to kind of reshape your mindset to because obviously it's not an overnight thing. You don't just decide it and then it's like, oh, everything's better. It's a process. So how did you do that?
And I love the word you use, intentionality, because you
Mhm.
do have to be intentional in this. And it sounds elementary.
Mhm.
I'm a to-do list person. Like I can be in the task box. And so it started with me really writing out a list of what am I sad about?
Mhm.
What am I depressed about? Like, what are my thoughts every day? So I've been journaling since I was 8. So I began journaling to God when I was 8, when my parents separated, just as a place to kind of process things.
Mhm.
But when I began to look even at my journals, they were very depressing. They were
Mhm.
more like complaints and sadness. So I had to change that. I had to list like, what am I sad about? What do I want it to look like? So I had to look at everything from the books I read
Mhm.
to the music I listen to the words I speak, to not just what I'm thinking, but how long am I thinking it? And I remember someone saying, when you're having these depressed moments, to think about it like visiting your in-laws.
Mhm.
Go for the weekend and come back home.
Yep.
And that became something for me to think through. If I'm having a bad day or bad moment, okay, Chandra, you've got a 3-day window.
Yep.
Okay. So get up, get dressed, open the curtains, go to the store, like just get out of the house. And
Yep.
that's a start. And then I started changing even how I looked at scripture for my life. Whereas I would find scripture that identified with my pain, I needed scripture that would give me hope, scripture
Mhm.
that would show me promise. I
Mhm.
needed books that were inspiring. I needed to listen to the lyrics of the words that I was listening to.
Mhm.
What were those lyrics saying? Were they really keeping me down in that low place? Or were they really encouraging me to come out of the place where I was? And like you said, Kevin, it's not something that happened overnight.
Mhm.
It has taken years for me to stay in a mindset. And sometimes I slip back and I'm reminded that, hey, Chandra, you know how to come out of this place. What are you listening to? What movie did you watch last night before you went to bed? What have you been listening to all day? What have your conversations been? What books are you reading? What are you feeding your mind? And then how are you responding to what your thoughts are?
Yeah, I think that's so good. We've talked about it before of like what you consume, you become, right? And to take to we just again this idea we've talked about a billion times on Monday Mindset, but intentional versus accidental. So many of us are accidentally consuming things,
Yes.
TV shows, music, podcasts, words from
Mhm.
people in our life that aren't healthy. They're not
Mm.
true, and we ignore the impact. I remember being a kid like video games came out like, oh, don't play violent video games. You're going to be a murderer. It's like, well, I never played a video game that made me want to murder someone. But if I was honest, it probably did make me angrier.
Yeah.
Like it made me a little more on edge. It made me a little more impatient. And so
Yeah.
like we tend to go to the extreme, like, well, it didn't make me do this, like, but it still didn't create anything good. Right. It
Right.
still wasn't putting you in a helpful space. And so being able to back out and say, wait a minute,
Mhm.
I'm not gonna be this person. I'm not gonna be positive. I'm not gonna be hopeful if I'm not consuming things that actually stir up and give me hope. or if I'm consuming things that are negative and depressing and anxious, like
Mhm.
then that's gonna come out of me. And so to shift your patterns into what you're consuming, that's the way to start, right? It's like you've
Right.
got to give yourself a chance to get out. I also love what you said, because we're gonna have bad thoughts, right? We're gonna have negative thoughts. Like these moments, like you don't build a healthy mindset and it's just set in stone forever and you never have a bad thought again, right? It's like that's unrealistic.
Yeah.
And we're not pursuing perfection, we're pursuing progress.
Yes.
And in the midst of progress, you're still going to trip and stumble and fall. And I love the thing, like you're basically giving yourself permission to have those bad thoughts, to not shame yourself for having them, right? To go the in-law things, like, no, you go visit for a couple of days and then get out. It's like, hey, you're going to have those bad thoughts. Don't beat yourself up for having that bad thought. Just don't create a space where it can stay for too long, right? You don't just rest in those bad thoughts. Like, hey, you're here. Now let's have a plan to get out.
And I think, Kevin, even in that, for me, having something like go for the weekend and come back, it gives me the opportunity to look for patterns.
That's right.
Like, are there certain seasons in my life that I found myself in these spaces? Are there certain people and conversations with them that send me spiraling in this? Is it, me frustrated with work I'm doing or a behavior? Is it, just being able to look at that and say, hey, this could be a trigger for me. And I want to be aware of that, because if I'm aware of that, then I can be proactive and get ahead of it so that I can then change what the response is. And maybe this time I don't have to go for 3 days. I can go for 2 days and then 2 days, and I can go for 1 day because I've now looked at it, studied it, I'm aware of it. Now I can respond.
That's right. And it's fighting the right battles, right? Like giving yourself a better chance to win. Because if you're trying to fight, once the thought's already in, that's a winnable battle, but it's a much harder battle. But if you know what causes the thought and you can prepare for that battle, then you're giving yourself a better chance to never let that thought, the bad thought, the negative thought, the unhealthy thought actually kind of come in and take root. That's really good. So what are things that you do, in some kind of consistent rhythm, right? To keep building that mindset. We talked about, like, you don't just get a mindset and you're there. Like, you have to keep working at it. It's a muscle. If you ignore your mindset, it's going to go back to being unhealthy. It's going to go back to being a liability for you. So how do you keep working at it? Are there things you do each day, each week? Are there rhythms that you put in place in your life to make your mindset a priority?
Definitely. I'm an avid learner. So I love reading. I love learning things that are going to encourage me, empower me. But if I think of my daily rhythms, I'll start with the evening, just because in the evening I found writing out my to-do list kind of ignites me into the day. When I don't, I wake up feeling a little bit scrambled and needing to ground myself. So at the end of my day, and of course, I learned a new rhythm while I was a giant this week, but at the end of my day, I typically will write out my list of things to do for the next day, kind of seeing what I didn't get accomplished, where I want to go. I even look at my week. On Sundays, I kind of look at my week. It kind of just puts me in a headspace to kind of focus and know where I'm going. But when I get up in the morning, I start off with prayer and just spending some time just kind of, asking the Lord what his plans are. And then I journal, just like I've done for almost 50 years. But about 2 years ago, I started journaling and including in my journal 10 things I'm thankful for. So every day, every morning, I write at least 10 things I'm thankful for. And that's past things, that's present things, that's future things. So yesterday, I was thankful for our interview today. And today I was thankful for our interview today. So it's not deep things. Sometimes it's depending on what space I'm in. I'm thankful for my home and being near my family again. Sometimes I'm thankful for new job opportunities and open doors. Sometimes I'm thankful for friends and just having dinner with them. But it's 10 things I'm thankful for. And to me, that doesn't just give me a strong mindset, but it puts my heart in a posture to even how I'm going to respond to people. And then I read a devotional, some scripture, but then I finalize my to-do list. So it's like I have this rhythm of pray, journal, thankful, read my devotion, and then let's look at my to-do list and let's just kind of sure it up. And then I'm ready for my day. Like I feel like I can conquer my day anytime I do that every day.
Yeah. And for those listening, I hope you realize like that's so simple,
Mm-hmm.
right? You didn't just lay out like a 27-hour process.
Mm-hmm.
Like in a matter of a few minutes, right? Your mind is in the right place. You're ready again to flip that switch to being intentional. And yeah, so much good from that. I think it's really interesting because there's I don't know, two things make a pattern, but you mentioned it. Jeremy mentioned it when he was on Monday Mindset, what his evening routine is. You've now mentioned it. My wife has just created a journal for women to use as like an evening ritual, reflection. And so there's been a focus on mornings for a long time, which I'm a big fan of how you start your day. I think how you start your day sets the tone for the rest of your day. But the evening piece, I think too many of us go to bed and our heads are just full from the wins of the day, the losses of the day, the stress of the day. And it's like just to be able to get that out gives you some mental clarity, gives you some freedom, allows you to really rest, which sets you just good rest sets you up to have a better day the next day. But then to continue that rhythm into the morning to say, I do this, this, and this. And I love the gratitude thing. I've been doing it for the last, let me look at this app. I use an app called Day One. I'm 230 days in.
Wow.
So I started it during the pandemic. Same thing. Part of my morning routine now is listing 10 things that I'm grateful for. And it takes the worry out of the day. To your point, get you in a posture of like gratitude and humility of whatever's going on, right? It could be, I mean, this last year has been really stressful for people, right? But I could still, and as someone who traveled around the country to speak, well, that didn't happen. I get on an airplane this week for the first time in 16 months, but it's like, I still had a lot to be grateful for. And we tend to make that huge things. Well, nothing's really going on. I'm like, what do I have to be grateful for? Well, you're in a bed. You got to sleep in.
Yes, exactly.
You have socks on your feet. Like I heard a speaker one time. He goes, when you're trying to stir up gratitude, he goes, start with the small, like go from your socks to where you're wearing pants and you have a shirt and you have a watch and you have a cup of water. Like you start small, but the point is like, you're still stirring up gratitude. And it's hard to have a bad day when you're in a posture of gratitude, as opposed to starting your day with email and stress and anxiety. It's like, no, that stuff's going to be there. Start with gratitude. Speaking of the pandemic, the last year, I know, and we've asked a lot of people this, but it was a crazy year. Some people had great years. Some people had really bad years. Some people were in between, but it's just a different and difficult year. How do you think your mindset impacted your approach to the last year? I don't say your success or failure, but to how would you describe the last year for you, and how do you think your mindset impacted that?
The last year for me was good. So I didn't have what I would call a bad year, but I think it's because of perspective for me. And I think that's really for all of us, everything. So if I could go back about 5.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And it was there that I think my mindset really was important. It was like a light came on, like what you think about this is going to determine how you walk through it. So when I got to the pandemic, I've had these 5+ years to really think through perspective and to see that even in what may look like the worst, there's some good that can come out of it. So that's how I approached the pandemic. I felt like God was talking to the whole world. Like he put us all on pause, and I didn't want to miss what he had. So I began to say, okay, Lord, what can I do in this time? What is it that Chandra can do since we're isolated alone? And so I decided 2 main things. One, I wanted to work on my craft, which is training, speaking. Got certified, finished my 5 voices. I finished my degree, a certificate in nonprofit management. But the other part was, how am I going to do community? I'm single, divorced. My child is 36. Like I have an adult child, married, grandkids. I'm alone. So what is community going to look like for me? Because I think that's the other thing, Kevin, that I've learned is that a lot of times when we don't have a strong mindset, it's because we're having so many conversations in our head. And we need people to dialogue with to help us have healthy mindsets, to help us have a strong mindset. And I knew that if I remained isolated and alone and not talking to people, even though I'm an introvert, that I could spiral back down.
Yep.
So I had some friends that we just decided we're going to Zoom, like we're going to talk. We are going to make sure we're intentional about encouraging one another, spending time with one another virtually. Even though, I still was able to go into the office some, I just tried to be intentional about maintaining relationships. And then when I moved to Nashville, one of my best friends of over 20 years, when things began to slowly open up and I felt like I needed to kind of get out, I just say, hey, can we just go grab a bite to eat once a week while I kind of get my grounding back here? And that really helped me during the pandemic to not focus on all the negative. Now, obviously, we've all been touched by loss, I think, because of the pandemic and COVID. But I just try to look at it through the lens of, what can I be thankful for in this? What can we be thankful for in this? And how do we walk this out well and live it out so that when we come out of it, I don't want to miss what God had for me and the opportunity that I had to slow down and kind of reset in this season.
Well, and you nailed it, because like the word perspective is so critical. We talked about it on Monday Mindset. Like a mentor of mine once said that your perspective determines your experience. Right? You have a negative perspective, then you have a negative experience. You have a positive perspective, you have a positive experience. And usually we get that perspective after the fact, right? We go through really difficult seasons and we hate it. It's miserable. It's awful. And then 5 years later, 10 years later, or whatever, we look back like, you know what? Like that was actually a really good season for me. Like I learned a lot about who I was. That was a catalyst for growth or whatever it may be, but we hated it at the time. And so this ability to have perspective in the middle of the adversity, in the middle of the chaos, I think that's what took a lot of people out, is that, the world just kind of flipped upside down in a matter of days, it felt like. And so many, and again, if you hear this and this is you, don't feel shame about this. It's just a learning opportunity. But so many, like their perspective went negative real quick and they shut down as the world shut down. But to say, wait a minute, no, like something's happening. What does this mean for me? Is there a learning opportunity? Is there a growth opportunity? What do I need to engage in? Even as an introvert, it's like, no, I needed people. And I knew this could, to know yourself so well, it's like, you know what, this could be I see the stress coming. I see where this could go. So I'm going to lead myself well and be intentional to make sure this doesn't happen. And you see the people who operated that way within the pandemic had a good year. It doesn't mean it wasn't hard. Doesn't mean there wasn't stress in the midst of it, but they're coming out of it. It's like, hey, I'm better. I chose to be intentional in the midst of all that, while others are coming out just battered and bruised. And again, like learn from that, right? Don't shame yourself for that. Say, you know what, I think there's a time, I've been talking a lot with leaders about this, that at some point, leaders of organizations and governments and communities are going to have to reflect on how they led through the past year. Say, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? What did I do well? Why did I respond the way that I did? If this happens again, like what can I learn? It may not be a pandemic, but adversity is always going to hit. So how can I lead better the next time adversity hits? But I think that's just true for us as people, as individuals. We need to take time to reflect and say, okay, now that we're kind of opening back up, not fully, but it's pretty close to whatever normal is going to be.
Right.
To pause and reflect, say, how was I last year?
Yeah.
Like, would I want to be that version of me again? Was that the best version of me? What did I do well? What could I have done better? And again, the point of that is to not ever shame yourself and say, I could have done better with that. So I'm going to make a note. Next time stress hits, I want to be this person. I'm going to lead myself this way. So I love just the power that you shared. Just the power of perspective shapes how we handle adversity.
Yeah. And Kevin, for me, I didn't get it all right. Like I moved from the state of Virginia to the state of Tennessee in a pandemic. Like who would even do that except, you're supposed to be doing that because the Lord said do it, but who would do that in the middle of a pandemic? But I had to think through everything from, do I have drivers? Do I have movers because of COVID?
Yeah.
People touching things. I'm coming to help care for my 80-year-old mom and not wanting to expose her. So I ended up doing one of those, like you pack up the truck and they bring it because I didn't want to expose a driver. It was just so many things. But then when I got here, because I hadn't been here for 14 years, yeah, I have friends, but here I'm in a house, I'm in a new place, an old place with a new me. And the first few weeks were very hard because I had not been here. And it was then that I saw myself kind of getting sad and depressed and missing Virginia, and just something as simple as getting up and walking around the neighborhood in the morning gave me a space to think about, okay, Chandra, you know your patterns, you know what this means. Like, what are you going to do to change this? And that's where the thought, okay, I need to have dinner with a friend. Like, I need to intentionally connect. I need to change my thinking. I need to see this as an opportunity. God makes no mistakes. You're 5 minutes from your son and his wife and his grandchildren, And I think, like you said, Kevin, there's no shame. It's we're learning, we're growing. And every time you talk with somebody, we have the opportunity to say, hey, there's a place I can tweak my life. I can tweak this pattern. I can get better. And that's what I felt like last week was being there with you all. I learned so many things like, well, I can't do them all at one time, but I can begin to tweak this here and tweak that there. And it's going to make how I think and see and do life so much better, so much better. So I love that you're doing this. So thank you.
No, thank you. Tracy, I'll let you jump back in. Do we have any questions flying in from our 87 million listeners?
We do. Actually, first of all, I want to show Chandra's affiliate code, because if you're out there thinking, I love this woman, I need her, I want to work with her.
And if you're not thinking that, question
you're
your
crazy. Right. But Chandra is one of our consultants, and she works with clients one-on-one with coaching, but then she also works with companies, nonprofits, things like that. So if you're one of those and you think I could talk to her for a minute and see what all she has to offer, then go to giant.tv and put her name there behind, and that will connect you on there. And then once you're on, that will allow you to have a free Ascend account. That's just a free account where you can see lots of series and episodes that are just going to be very valuable to you. But that will connect her to you, so that if you decide to do a free boot camp, which I highly recommend, that means she'll get an email saying these people are ready for a boot camp, and that's of no charge. So if nothing else, you get to chat with her for no charge. So I recommend.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah. All right. So first of all, a quick one before we go to the real questions. And that is, not that this isn't a real question, but several people are saying, okay, that journal that Kevin mentioned that his wife has, just letting you all know that if you want to order that, they're pre-orders, I believe, right now, right, Kevin?
Fairly certain that's true. I'm not an expert in this stuff, but yeah. Okay. I think pre-orders are up right now.
Okay. So go to Instagram and follow Megan DeShazo on girl.flourish. You'll find her there. And then in her bio link, you'll see a place that you can actually get on the list to do that. So that's that. Now, first question coming in. Sarah is saying, what top 3 books could you recommend to me? I'm graduating from college in May and will be starting my first job.
Whew. All right, Chandra.
Kevin.
Are there 3 books that you just think I'm assuming Sarah is a woman, so every woman entering the workforce, this would be helpful?
Ooh. My favorite book for women is Captivating by John and Stacey Eldridge, hands down. And I love the book because not only it just helps unveil a woman in any setting. It talks about not just her career, but her relationship with her mom, siblings, women. But it really talks about how we just have been created as women. So that's my favorite book for women. I'd have to think through what my recommendation would be for her starting her first job. Kevin, you may have something that you think of. I'm just thinking.
I've got lots.
Setting. See, I knew it.
The first one, that if you haven't read it already, Sarah, what are we doing here? Keep Chopping Wood. No, I would not recommend it. It's by this weird guy named Kevin DeShazo. No, I'm going to be a real shameless plug, not for me. Like, read the 100X Leader. I don't care where you are in life. Like, that will give you a mindset for yourself and for building influence the right way as you enter your career. Because there's a lot of wrong ways to build influence as you enter into the workforce. So that will give you a roadmap on leading yourself well and building influence with others. I think there's a great book called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. It's again kind of about mindset and how you pursue things. I'm scrolling through my Kindle. I've got like just a billion books that.
Oh, well, that's what I should have done, Kevin. See, you're smarter than me.
Well, I was gonna say I read too much. I don't. I buy a lot of books and don't read them. Here's one that's, and I'm gonna actually putting this out into the world. I'm gonna see if I can get this guy on Monday Mindset. It'll be a big one. I followed him for a decade. His name is John Acuff. He's a speaker. He's a writer. Lives in Nashville. He has a new book out called Soundtracks. And it's about the soundtracks that you play in your mind and how that impacts how you live. And if you want to have a better life, you have to have a better soundtrack that you're listening to. And so I just think this, we're on the Monday Mindset. So I want to recommend a book on mindset because I think, Sarah, number one, congrats.
Yes.
This is an exciting new phase of life that you're entering into. And as you lead yourself well and learn about yourself, I just think your mindset will really shape the impact. I don't want to say the success of your career, but the impact of your career. And so being intentional, I wish I would have thought about mindset 20 years ago.
Yes.
Instead of 5 years ago. And so start working on your mindset now. But I think Soundtracks it's funny. He's a great humor, just makes complex things really simple and practical. So those would be three I think would be good.
That's great. Did you happen to think of any more? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I don't have any more.
Yeah, I will shamelessly plug the 5 voices because if I had been a 22-year-old going into the workforce, knowing the differences between people's personalities, their voices, why people act the way they do or make decisions the way they do, that would have been big.
For me. So. And while you're doing that, while you're reading that book, Sarah, just go to giant.tv/Chandra Jarrett and take the free 5 voices assessment. Yeah. And get your free 5 voices coach on the platform.
That's right. Okay. Next one, David is asking, and I love this question. I'm actually going to add to it. Who gave you the courage to become an engineer? Who or what inspired you to go for it? And I will say this. I will just say, woman, you're a woman. You're a Black woman. And I'm thinking engineering, there couldn't have been that many women maybe in your field. So who spoke into you that said you could do this?
Great question, David. In high school, I took a career education class. And in the career education class, we took an assessment. It was my senior year. I didn't know what I wanted to be. Like my mom just gave us 2 options. You work or you go to college. And the assessment, the results were accountant because I was very good in math, but I love to use my hands and engineer. And I researched engineering. And after researching engineering, I decided I wanted to be a mechanical engineer because electrical engineering, I felt like I couldn't see it. Like circuits, electricity, I'll burn something down. Not me. But mechanical engineering, I could use my hands and do it. And I was accepted to three great colleges, Tennessee State, University of Knoxville. But because it was home, I just went to Tennessee State. And you're right, Tracy, it wasn't a lot of women, but going to a Black college allowed me to be surrounded by engineers. So my son's father, my ex-husband, is an engineer. He graduated with a 4.0. So being able to see people who look like me pursuing engineering degrees gave me the courage to say, I can do this. I can go and I can be successful at this. And I was. So great question. Great question.
Yep. Well, great. Love that. Okay. That's really all the questions that have come in. And what do you say, Kevin? How do we wrap Genius up today? I mean,
we don't. We're just going to stay on for another 2 hours, everyone. So one, Chandra, thank you. I so appreciate your wisdom, your time, just willingness to share. Hopefully you guys, I'm not gonna say hopefully, I know you're inspired. I'm not gonna say I hope that you're inspired. I know you are. I know that people got something from the last 40 minutes of conversation. So I appreciate that. And we'll end with this. What are you excited about right now?
I am. Okay, Russell. Okay. Yay. Yes.
That's cool.
Yes.
I'm surrounded by engineers. What is happening?
Yes, I know.
Don't worry, I'm leveling it out here for you, Kevin.
You're brilliant like us, Kevin. You're brilliant.
I don't know about that.
So last week I was in OKC, like you said. I like how you say OKC, so that's what I'm going to say. With Giant. And I am most excited about being able to influence as many leaders as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Like being there at Giant and learning just the backside of how we do what we do, meeting you all, it just really ignited a fire in me. Like, I want to reach as many people as I can. And as you shared with Sarah, I didn't know this 20 years ago. I didn't know this 25 years ago. So I talked to my son, who's an attorney, on the way from the airport. I think I talked his head off, so much so that he's like, Mom, I think I need to do this too. I think you do too, Marcus. Like, you need to do this. Your wife needs to do this.
Listen to your mother, Marcus.
I want to have a power couple group of your friends who are business owners. I want to do a women in leadership and ministry group. Like, it just got my mind going about so many people who could learn about Five Voices, who could learn about the gaps in their leadership, as you referred to earlier, Kevin. These blind spots, not because we have to be ashamed, it's just because we don't know. We've never had the tools. We've never had anything to show us. And so I'm excited just to be able to influence the world with Giant.
Amen.
A lot of potential.
Yeah. That's
I love
awesome.
it.
So,
You all already are.
so that's what I'm excited about. I'll stop because I will talk for 2 hours.
Well, we sure appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Thanks all of you. There was a lot of chatter going on around you, Chandra. So thank you for that. And again, next week, I'm not sure what we've got going on, Kevin. I want you to surprise us, but we'll see you next Monday, next time, same place. See you all.